to talk about what we can do, because we can't rely on government, obviously, so we're going to talk about what we can do. But before we do, I know that there are a number of you here in the room who have a couple of concerns specific to things that are going on here in Miramichi right now, one of them being the P3 nursing home. And I know that most of you have already probably attended meetings on that, and I'm not really going to get into that conversation. But there is one little thing that you might be interested in knowing. This article was only published in the French newspaper, L'Acadie Nouvelle. I did not see it covered in any English newspaper, which is why I'm thinking that you may not know about it. At the time that the P3 for Miramichi was announced, Minister Kathy Rogers spoke to L'Acadie Nouvelle, and one of the benefits that she promoted behind this P3 business model was that it would give government greater control over ensuring that the new nursing home in Miramichi complies with the Official Languages Act, because by entering into a private government partnership, they are essentially providing service on behalf of the government and can be ordered to comply with the Official Languages Act. That's one of the drivers. Not the only driver, I'm not going to lie to you and say that it is the only driver, but that is one of the drivers behind the push on this business model.
Sharon,
Yes?
why in Moncton then, if they can build a French-only nursing home, not comply with the English?
Privately funded.
That French-only nursing home that is being proposed in Moncton
UDM?
is, yeah, U to M. It will focus primarily on the alumni of U to M. However, it will be Francophone only. And they are saying that it is privately funded. However, if you take a look at the funding for the university, it's something like 70% of their funding that's provided by government, both provincial and federal. So how they could say it's privately funded, I can't even begin to explain. But that also falls under a culture that we were talking about a few minutes ago. There are so many schools, businesses, and associations in this province that are mandated to comply with the Official Languages Act. And then there are so many that are exempted from complying because they are considered cultural institutions within the Francophone division. Okay? If you, as a parent, go to your local high school, it may be an English high school, but if you request it, you can receive communication from them in French. That is your right. However, there are certain Francophone schools that have been designated as cultural, and you have no right to get any communication from them in English whatsoever. We've tried. Can't be done. Okay. Yeah, where did my helper go? Where did my helper go? Yeah, let's get a hand for the helper. So most of the slides that I have, there's only a couple of slides that really need to be paid attention to. The rest I've just put in there to have something up on the screen. I would rather talk to you than read at you. So for the most part, the slides are irrelevant. We are going to the Official Languages Act right after. How do we get to this point? That's right, that's what you're looking for. How do we get to this point? You've gone past it, I think.
Excuse me, Sharon.
Yes, ma'am.
You have several presentations on YouTube that people can view.
I do have several videos that are available on YouTube. Most of my presentation here today is actually available on YouTube with voiceover and with a little bit more detail than what I'm giving here today. no, but you know what, that's good enough, you can just leave it right there, because the slides that were in there were fillers. So, how did we end up here? Well, it started with the Official Languages Act. Okay? The Official Languages Act, or the OLA as we all know it, was adopted in 1969 with progressive implementation, and it became fully in effect in 1977. Over time, so many changes to that act were proposed, primarily by Francophone associations, but not solely by Francophone associations, that it was considered necessary to completely rewrite the laws and policies. The act was repealed and replaced by the new Official Languages Act on June 2nd, 2002. The new act was much broader in scope, and it had many amendments, including the active offer of service and obligations on cities and on municipalities with a minority language population of 20%. The interesting part to me is that in June of 2013, Bill 72 amended it again in response to the recommendations from a select committee. Those meetings were held behind closed doors. Now, at the time, there were requests from opposition parties and from members of the public to be included in those conversations. And the response was no. Any conversation related to language or to bilingualism in this province was considered too controversial or too emotional for us to be involved in. However, I'd like to point out that there were a number of Francophone associations that were involved in those conversations. Okay. The government right now meets yearly as well as on an as-needed basis with Francophone interests, and so far there are no Anglophone interests or organizations that are being included in those. The important thing for you to know is not the history. The important thing to know is the future. The next revision of the Official Languages Act is due no later than December 31st, 2021, which is 5 years away. It may come earlier than that, but it can be no later. There's a provincial election in 3 years.
Exactly.
So if you want to have any opportunity to make a difference, the time to think about it is not 3 months before the election. The time to start thinking about it is now.
Speaking and doing.
Okay. Along with the Official Languages Act, in 1988, the Language of Work policy was also introduced. Over years, that policy as well has been amended many times. But it was intended to broaden the scope and opportunities for employees within departments and agencies to work within their language of choice, which means that personnel and payroll services, yearly performance appraisals, and needed work instruments must be available to employees in the preferred official language. It means that staff can communicate with their head office and with line departments, and that intergovernment departments can communicate with central agencies in their daily work, meetings, discussions, or when drafting documents. Now, I can give you a really good example of this. Some of you know, some of you don't, that in order to obtain the information that we have obtained, we've filed a number of right to information requests. And one of the requests that we filed was for information on the funding and political involvement of the SANB. And I'm finding some very, very interesting information within there, and as soon as I have it all sorted out, I will make that information available. However, it is a very long and slow process because I received a banker's box, probably about 5,000 pages. 70% of it is in French. I don't speak French, so I'm relying on Google Translate and some very good friends to help me sort through it. But I can tell you that they get in the tens of thousands of dollars every year. Some years $40,000, some years $90,000 to promote the Francophone interests in New Brunswick.
should send a complaint to the official language of the commissioner.
Yeah, it can be translated.
Do you think I'd have much luck with that?
Too bad.
Oh, yes, along with the 70% that is in French, probably 80% is redacted information. So it's sorting through all of that and getting to what we can use. But in theory, the right to service in your language of choice, the right to work in your language of choice, these are good theories. They really are. These are good theories. So what's wrong with them? Well, it's the reason and the logic that are not being used. Doesn't mean that these services can't be available. It means we need to look at how we're using them. For example, cities are automatically required to comply, and municipalities with a minority language of 20% are required to ensure that communication of all public information is available in both official languages, regardless of use. Now, the example I'm going to use is in Fredericton. One of their counselors, not going to use names here because it started a whole turmoil and that individual was essentially ostracized, spoke up to the media and mentioned that at Fredericton City Council meetings, they have been providing translation services for more than 10 years at a cost of $1,200 per meeting. In 10 years, they could remember one time that those services were used. Okay? So we're not saying that those services should not be available if they're going to be needed. But why are we forking out $1,200 for every meeting and the services aren't going to be used? If you're going to need those services, let us know. We'll make sure that they're available.
That's just the tip, right?
Okay? That's not rocket science. That's not rocket science. So what is happening right now is that communities often do not have the bilingual population to fill the jobs. Service New Brunswick, the liquor stores have to provide service in French. If you're getting any pressure on private businesses, they have to provide. So what happens is they hire from outside of their communities to fill the bilingual positions, and then your local people can't get the jobs. Doesn't make any sense. The Commissioner of Official Languages has suggested that all senior positions should be mandated bilingual. Now, we know that the government did step up at the moment and say that they're not looking to do that. That doesn't mean that they are not going to change their mind tomorrow. She has put it in her published report that in New Brunswick, it is no longer acceptable that senior positions can be filled by an individual who is unilingual. Okay? And that doesn't just mean the Anglophone population. We do have a small Francophone unilingual population in this province. And they're disqualified as well. In Ontario, they use a 911 service that serves 170 languages for their ambulances and paramedics. 170 languages. In New Brunswick, the Official Languages Commissioner has said that that is not acceptable. Translation services are not acceptable. The use of translators, the use of telephone, the use of programs, not acceptable. All ambulances should carry at least one bilingual paramedic. Right now, they can't meet that mandate. They're still working on it. We have situations, many of you probably know somebody, a family member or a friend, who maybe is on a renewed casual contract with Ambulance New Brunswick. They're being offered term periods of 8 to 12 weeks if they're unilingual. And those positions are constantly reposted as bilingual required, and when they find a bilingual required, then that position is given to them. So this means that the men and women in this province who see some of the worst things imaginable and face some of the most trying circumstances imaginable are also having to live with job insecurity and deplorable working conditions on top of that. Now, when I tell you that we know something, we know it, and I can provide you the documentation. When I tell you that we've heard something, it means we're looking into it. I don't have the documentation yet, but I have a good reason to believe that it's true. And through a right to information request, we did find out, it has been confirmed, that there are individuals, at least 2, possibly more, paramedics in the province of New Brunswick who have been hired from outside to come in and work. And it has been verified that in some cases, they did not confirm these 2 specific cases, but in some cases, the licensing fees, settlement, and union dues of these individuals are paid for them. Now, what I have heard, and cannot yet confirm, but another request has been filed, is that 2 individuals have been hired from the province of Quebec, and that those 2 individuals have restrictions on their licenses. There are 2 specific procedures that New Brunswick paramedics are allowed to perform, that these 2 individuals are not allowed to perform. So technically, they don't meet the criteria, but they have been hired because they speak French. Okay. And also, we have heard that beginning in mid-December, that there is going to be a further push to increase the bilingual presence on ambulances. So far, no ambulances are being taken out of service due to not having a bilingual rep. That rumor was out there, it's not true. No ambulances are being taken out of service. There have been times, however, where working conditions for our paramedics in this province have been so low that there have been nights where this province was short 22 ambulances because of people calling in sick. That's not a good situation, and that can't continue. So the demand for bilingualism has actually exceeded the availability. We don't have enough bilingual people to fill the positions that are being required, and that's both government and private positions. So we're recruiting.
Where from?
We have been recruiting for paramedics in Ontario and Quebec. However, we've been holding job fairs in France, in Belgium, in certain African countries where there is a high Francophone population. Yeah. Yeah. And in a moment, I'm going to bring out a really special guest. And we'll have to keep him on track because he has so much good information that we all want to question him. And believe me, I want to question him. I've only had a couple of opportunities to speak with him, and this man is incredible. He knows his stuff. And that is a former Australian senator, Mr. Len Harris, is going to come up and speak with you a little bit about laws and about what is happening here in New Brunswick. But before I bring him up, in her 2014-2015 annual report, the Commissioner of Official Languages stated that her office is chronically underfunded at $506,000 annually. However, she reported, this is not me making this up, this is available for any one of you to go and look at. She reported that 92.3% of her budget is required for the salaries and benefits of her office staff. So 7.7% covered the expenses associated with the small number of 170 complaints that were received last year And of those 170 complaints, 80 were admissible. 47 were inadmissible, 43 were referred to other departments. And, you know, some of these complaints are very legitimate. They require service when it pertains to health care, when it pertains to emergency services. I mean, these are important situations. However, a large number of those complaints involved the manner in which a telephone was answered, how the word fish was spelled on a travel brochure, the inability to select and pay for alcohol in your language of choice, and the inability to speak with a manager at a golf pro shop at the Mactaquac National Park. No, it doesn't. It doesn't break down.
Does it say if it's a real person or if it's just her?
Well, okay, let's touch briefly on the elephant in the room here, shall we?
One thing, and I think she's only got 5 staff under her,
Yes,
so that 90% of that 500,000 is only for 6 people.
yes. Yeah, that's very true. So,
She said that the other day.
$100,000 a year?
so the elephant in the room right now is the language commissioner and the situation that has unfolded in Fredericton with the English commissioner. Technically, she did nothing wrong. She acted within the powers that were given to her by the Allward government. Now, I think most of us, maybe not all of us, I think most of us believe that she acted in poor faith, that there may have been some ethics involved. Technically, she did nothing wrong. Okay? We have to remember that. She really did do nothing wrong. Being arrogant or having a very public disdain for the English population is not illegal. It is undesirable, but it's not illegal. However, when questioned at the committee meeting on Thursday as to whether she knew if any of her other investigations had prompted an action before her investigation was complete, she admitted that yes, she did know that. Which means that what she did knowing full well that there was a chance that this man's employment was going to be affected even before her investigation was completed, and she did it anyways. Okay? So she did it anyways. However, the blame here lies on the act that gave her that power in the first place. Okay? And it lies on the government.
Here, here.
Because the government stood in front of the media and they said, oh, well, it's up to the employer. The employer made that decision. It had nothing to do with us. Well, guess what? The night before that committee meeting, right to information documents that we had received were made public to the media. And they prove, and this was reported, they prove that government knew of his appointment as a unilingual at the time that he was appointed, and that they approved it. They also show the communications that went back and forth after she initiated her investigation, where they tried to backpedal, cover up, and hide it as quickly as possible, okay? On top of that, there is no amendment, no act, no law that can take away a right that you already have. He was already in that position. The reason he's being told, and the reason we are being told that he cannot be put back in that position, is because the government has requested a further level of bilingualism in that particular position since that time. So this man has had his hours reduced. He is working in a parking lot out in all weather, and they've taken his chair away from him on top of that. So he no longer has his chair that he's allowed to sit in either. Okay. So I have a couple of other real quick things. And then I'm gonna bring up Len. So the first thing is the blanket approach doesn't work. This one size, one fit all that we did have up on the screen a few minutes ago, it does not fit. You cannot put a law out there and tell everybody, everywhere in this province that this language law applies to you and expect it to fit. If I go up to Caracat, I do not expect that the first person I talk to is gonna be able to serve me in English. Because they have a 2% Anglophone population up there. I expect that they might be able to find somebody who can speak to me in English, or that they might be able to use an interpreter to help me. But I do not expect the first person that I talk to be able to speak to me in English. It would be unreasonable.
But that's our problem.
With more than 42%.
Most of those French people speak English up there.
Well, this is true, but they have the right to, they have the right to choose to speak in their language.
But yes, the English doesn't.
We have a right to.
So check, balance, and logic must be used in order to ensure that rights are protected. Rights can be protected. We just need to be logical about how we do it. We need to do this without discriminatory practices and without unreasonable cost, waste, duplication, and burden. With more than 42% of public sector employment designated bilingual, and with increasing pressures on the private sector to accommodate the language of preference, we need to ask ourselves, is it reasonable to accommodate 32% of the population? Are the measures we are taking reasonable? And then we need to ask ourselves another question. Can our current economic services and infrastructure meet the needs? So I'm gonna hit you with a couple of hard truths, okay? Very well-known facts. New Brunswick is Canada's fastest shrinking province.
Yeah.
Our population dropped by 941 in the first quarter of 2015, which is the strongest decline since 1980, 35 years. The Official Languages Act started in 1977 and the population started declining 3 years later. If that's a coincidence, maybe it is, I don't know. In the past 3 years, the population of New Brunswick has declined by 3,500, which is equivalent to the entire town of Dalhousie. Gone, lost, okay? It's more than double the decline of Canada's other two shrinking provinces, and it's the 17th straight quarter. 17th straight quarter of population decline. In addition to that, New Brunswick's economy has produced no job growth in 6 years. Sure, we're creating jobs. We're losing full-time jobs and we're creating part-time jobs. We're losing $50,000 income jobs and we're replacing them with $30,000 income jobs. We're going backwards. The majority of decline is workers of childbearing years who leave in search of work and end up raising their family somewhere else. When they're raising their family somewhere else, they're paying their taxes somewhere else. They're contributing to the economy somewhere else. Okay? Only 1,580 newborns were recorded in New Brunswick in the first quarter of 2015. It's the lowest number since records began in 1946. Now the reality is we're not having the large families we used to have. Okay? That's a reality. We have a strained healthcare system. The illiteracy rate in New Brunswick is 66%.
Literacy or illiteracy?
Illiteracy. Sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing it properly, but the illiteracy rate in New Brunswick is 66%. We have an aging population with more than 20% estimated to be age 65 or older by 2025, less than 10 years. And in 2014, for the first time ever, since records began, New Brunswick recorded more deaths than births. Okay? We have to do something. We have to do something. some communities, and I'm gonna use Campbellton for an example, are so hard pressed to fill positions that workers from Quebec are crossing the border and working at the Campbellton Hospital. It's just a short drive across. They are collecting a paycheck. Yes, they do pay a small income tax on their check here in New Brunswick. They then take that check back home with them at night to Quebec, where they pay their mortgages, buy their groceries, pay their utilities, entertainment, clothing. How is that helping New Brunswick? It's not helping New Brunswick at all. And if you go up there to the Campbellton Hospital and you drive around that parking lot, 50% or better of the license plates in that parking lot are Quebec license plates. So government's solution. Now I should have caught up with my screen. And this is government's solution. The Francophone Immigration Plan. Not the New Brunswick Growth Strategy, which is an entirely different plan, and that focuses on growth in New Brunswick. This is specifically the Francophone Immigration Plan. And I don't even know what to say to this. I really don't even know what to say, which is why I'm going to bring Len up here to talk to you. Because the steam starts coming out of my ears when I look at it. But just to give you a couple of highlighted points from this document, it's targeted to increase the Francophone immigration by 3% per year. Is there a plan in place to maintain the Anglophone population? And the answer is no, there's not. Okay. Yeah, there is no plan to maintain the Anglophone population. Now, realistically, if we're equal and we each have equal rights and equal protections, then if we're going to have a 33% Francophone immigration plan based on population numbers, we should have a 65% Anglophone target. We don't. The stated intention is to encourage newcomers to integrate into Francophone and Acadian communities. So people are being treated like property. We have a plan for them. We're looking at them as property. We want to file them away where we want them, where we think we need them. It considers Francophone immigration a competition with other provinces, most notably Quebec and Western provinces. And there is a clearly anti-Anglophone statement made in this document. It says, in particular, the European Union holds considerable potential for recruitment, as French is the second most widely spoken mother tongue after German and before English. So we're not going out and targeting people based on what they can contribute to our society or what we can contribute to them. We're targeting them based on the language that we speak. New Brunswick in 2009 received $10 million from the federal government for this plan. Okay, $10 million. There is a settlement and retention portion to this plan. There is financial assistance to this plan. And two statements that I found interesting. The first one is work is already underway on several fronts to move this action plan forward to collaborating with our Atlantic counterparts on joint promotion and attraction efforts. So what does that say to you? It says to me that they're pushing the other Atlantic provinces to get on board with this plan. Okay? And the last thing is on page 16, the closing statement. Government wishes to thank the society, I can't pronounce it, the SANB, I'm sorry, I cannot get the accent to pronounce it, for holding a day-long consultation on the population growth strategy. The SANB. Where was our representation? So now we're talking more about laws and how we can do what we can do and how we can't do what we can do. So this is where I'm going to bring Len up. And we're going to get him set up. But I hope that I have given you a couple of things to think about. And once Len has spoken to you, There's myself and one other speaker, and we're gonna tie in to what you can do to help and how we can together make a difference.